Today I want to talk about how to avoid making some of the most common mistakes while picking and gutting. So grab a snack and let's get started. A lot of times you can get a tensioner that just doesn't quite fit. That could be a mistake as it can pop out of the lock while you're picking, and it just doesn't give you that control over the core that you need to pick the lock. The best approach is a tight-fitting tensioner that gives you complete control of the core for picking. Another common mistake is using way too much tension. So if you've got a flat bar, if you're tensioning like this, that can be a lot of tension, and most likely that will get you broken picks or bent picks at the very least. You definitely just want to turn the core until it stops turning, and then just put some gentle pressure on the tensioner. You can adjust giving it a little more or a little less as needed, but don't start out with it at a very heavy tension because you're going to bend some picks. Picking the lock with the wrong profiled hook can make things very tedious. I suggest just starting out with a standard hook, and if you feel like you can't reach a pin, then you can switch to a longer hook as needed. However, sometimes with the standard hook, you still can't feel things in the lock and you're struggling to set pins. Don't be afraid to try out some different profiles and see which one works best for that particular lock. Another common mistake is when the core is turned and your lock is open, when you go to gut your lock and you're trying to remove the clamp from the back of the lock, you can sometimes accidentally turn the core back to the closed position. And that means you've got to re-pick the lock. While shimming the lock, if you push a little too hard, once you get to the front there, you can push your core out. And this can cause a lot of problems when the drivers drop down into the core and go flying all over. Definitely want to keep your finger pressed to the front of the lock when you're shimming, and just make sure that, when you get to the end, you're not letting the core slip out the front. If this gap right here on the core happens to be underneath the Bible, just like this, and you push it through the lock, if you don't have a shim, and sometimes even if you do have a shim, you can drop the drivers down through this gap and cause a gutting disaster. Another mistake is if you place this gap underneath the drivers when you are going to gut the lock. Again, that causes a gap that the drivers can fall into when you're pushing your follower through, and that can cause a gutting disaster. While you're pushing your core through, if you're not paying attention to where your key pins are going to come out, you can accidentally have it turned downward and all your key pins will drop out as you're pushing the core out. So just make sure that they're facing upwards so that doesn't happen. You always want to make sure that when you are taking the key pins out, you are putting them down on your tray from left to right. So left being the first pin and all the way on the far right being the very last key pin. When you're removing the drivers from your lock, you definitely want to make sure that you know the direction they are coming out and you lay them in the tray in the exact same direction. You definitely need to keep track of which direction the pins are going. So those are a few of the most common mistakes that you can make while picking and gutting locks. I hope this helps you avoid making some of the mistakes that I have made and makes your picking process a little bit smoother. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe for some more Locksport tips and tricks. Take care, guys.